I love talking to some of the most successful founders in the world, but I've also realized, but a lot of the things that they associate with their success, a lot of other founders have done as well, and yet have had materially different, not as good outcomes. And so what I've realized, and I think is so important going into this new year, something that we're going to do more and more of, is talking to founders who had some success, who raised some money, who got some revenue, but ultimately failed, and trying to dive into what it was that they didn't get right is actually equally as helpful as trying to understand how somebody grew a business that got to 100 or $1 billion in revenue. And I think as an early stage founder, listening to stories from both sides of the spectrum, looking at the hyper successful ones and trying to think through what they got right, but also looking at the ones that had some traction and ultimately failed and trying to think about what they got wrong. And between those two things, patterns are going to emerge and reasons are going to emerge that are going to help you figure out how to handle things in your day-to-day at your startup and get to product market fit and beyond that to true success. So today we have the founder of PromiseQ. He raised over $1 million. He got to 100,000 in ARR. He had customers, he had investors, he had a solid thesis, and yet it didn't pan out and he ultimately had to wind down the business. So today we go deep into why that happened. Think back to the last few months, the last few years as you've been running the startup. How many different founders have helped you out? The reality is founders help each other out. That's just who founders are. They pay it forward. So help a founder out. Take literally 5 seconds, take your phone out of your pocket and hit 5 stars. Tolga, welcome to the show, man.
Thank you. Thank you for the invitation, Pablo.
You had a startup that, ultimately failed, didn't work out, just like I did, just like many other founders that have been in the game for a while have. And but in your case, I mean, you raised 1.3 million euros, which I guess is I don't know, let's call one and a half to 2 million USD, but you hit 100K ARR. So you actually had, I mean, not just some investment, but you actually had some traction, and then things ultimately didn't pan out. And I think those stories are actually, we've had just great response to these kind of stories. Obviously, somebody who never raises anything or never gets any traction, people just assume, okay, maybe the idea just wasn't that good, or maybe they weren't all in on it, these sort of things. But the difference between a company that get to some amount of traction like yours and the ones that really hit is more nuanced than you might think from the outside. And just doing these stories and having lived it myself, you realize how much work goes into that and how many things actually the founders tend to get right. And it's just a handful of things that maybe either timing or some other subtleties that didn't really pan out. And that's the difference between success and failure. We'll dive into all that. Maybe just if you could tell us what was PromiseQ and kind of how did the idea come about in the first place?
Of course, sure. Yeah, you're absolutely right. We don't talk about these failures that much, and I think it's very important. So thank you for really giving the stage to founders that went through that. I think we have so many lessons to share with other founders that are up and coming that is maybe overlooked when just highlighting the ones that got super successful, may it be by luck and skills and all right time, right connections, right place. And so I'm Tolga. I am or was the co-founder and CEO of PromiseQ. It's a Berlin-based AI startup in the physical security field. So my background and the background of my co-founder Elias is actually in automotive. And before PromiseQ, we were working in R&D for autonomous driving cars, and we were developing and testing object detection algorithms, basically, that would come into a car and would basically be the perception of the cars, the camera-based perception. So we were doing that, and by coincidence, we figured out it was actually the father-in-law of Elias, my co-founder, who was working at a school as an administrator, and they had installed security cameras that was connected to his phone. There was no third-party commercial security company in between, and he was getting so many alerts in the evenings, on weekends, etc. His phone was just buzzing nonstop. And then he came up to us and was like, "Hey guys, you're engineers. Why don't you build a robot that would, go there and check if the alarms are actual relevant alarms?" And as you can imagine, most of those alarms, over 95%, that we figured out later on, are false alarms or irrelevant alarms. Because these cameras, they're super old that are in the field. They trigger on motion, they trigger on like in combination with other simple sensors when there's a contact or something. And you can imagine like most of the data and most of the triggers are just waste of time and completely irrelevant. You have animals walking by, you have the cameras shaking a little bit in the wind and creating alarms basically. And then Elias and I, we were like, okay, we do have the technology is there. Why didn't anybody automate that yet? And then we set out and built PromiseQ. Of course, we did like all the things you're supposed to do. We talked to actual commercial security companies, security operating centers to verify there is an actual problem, there's an actual need.
Walk me through that, because I think that's very important. I mean, I think at the surface level, it's an obvious, like when you describe it, it makes sense in theory. You say, okay, like there's cameras, and I have, a home security camera. A lot of people do, like, any animal, anything moving around, like that'll just set it off. So obviously a lot of false alarms. What motion do you go, like when you talk about research and talking to customers, like how many people in the space, whether it's customers or potential partners or other vendors, do you speak with, and what do you start hearing through those conversations?
We started, I mean, there is like templates online. You can see like B2B lean startup stuff. You can find those templates online, and you have like a questionnaire. You have to really define your problem. I mean, we already knew kind of the technology we wanted to push. So it's like what you're not supposed to do. But then we tried to validate this problem that we coincidentally figured out. Then we started out talking to these companies, to leads in these security operating centers. Probably we identified them, we reached out to them through either people from our network or cold outreach on LinkedIn. And then we had our first few dozen interviews. And the problem was not only with Elias's father-in-law, it was actually a problem in the security industry, in the whole security process chain, basically the cameras. And then you have like a few companies in between that do the monitoring, that do a bunch of work, that send guards, etc. And our initial hypothesis was basically verified like that. We were still working full time in our other jobs, in our previous job. So we did all that on weekends and in the evenings, which was quite hard, but very exciting also. And then we were basically at a point where, okay, we had the problem verified. We did start building an MVP. And then it was like, okay, we can't half-ass our day jobs. We can't also half-ass the startup idea. So we had to make a decision. Okay, now we are
kind of going all in.
Yeah, we have to go all in.
Committee.
Exactly.
I remember when, Gym Track, which was my startup, was a 5-year journey, and the first one was product 1, and then at one point we pivoted to product 2. And I remember the then CEO and I, because we'd hired a professional CEO, as we started thinking about product 2, we went down to this conference. We went down to this conference in, I think it was in Palm Springs, and we met with like 20 different gym operators. We were selling into gyms. And we described the new thing that we were doing, and we asked them whether it was truly a problem for them. And we had literally all 20 of them tell us that this was definitely a pain point, that it was definitely a problem. We even, at one point, it was 2 days. On the second day, we were listening, we were hearing people tell other people about what we were doing. So as you can imagine, we left there elated and convinced that we were actually really solving a pain point. And what happened, Tolga, after this is we started obviously trying to sell to like the most interested ones out of those, the ones that were like, yeah, that not only do I have a pain point, that pricing makes sense, definitely want to be a buyer. And out of those 20 conversations, we made exactly 0 sales. We didn't convert a single one. It took me a long time to realize that we solved a problem. It just wasn't a top priority problem. It was not a number 1 problem or a number 2 problem for them. And we probably could have figured that out if we'd done the verification a totally different way. You said something that struck this chord with me because you said like we kind of pushed it in our direction. So I guess I'm curious, when you reflect on what you did, do you feel that you were solving a top priority problem, or was it more like what I ended up doing at Gym Trust?
It's exactly like yours. When I look back, it's a super extremely good point, I think, for any new founder that has, this brilliant idea for a product, and then they try to push it so hard on a not top priority pain point. I think that's really the issue, and you have to really be fast in figuring out that, okay, that's not it. And for us, it took way too long until we realized, okay, it is a problem, but it's not their top priority. That's why they were interested, but they were not buying that quickly. The sales cycles were super long. Then we had also the issue. So what we built was this cloud-based false alarm filtering with a computer vision module that would automatically analyze the incoming alarms from the cameras and then get rid of the irrelevant alarms and only forward the real alarms to the security operating center. So the operators only focus on real alarms. They save time and money. They can really focus on the actual alarm. They don't miss real alarms anymore. Sounds everything super great. But because it was cloud-based, we had 2 integrations to do. So we were a module in a security, in a tool chain, basically. So we had to get the data in from the cameras, and the data was all different formats. So we had to build many integrations, and all integration, every customer was basically a custom integration project, which made the sales cycle super long. And then at the end, the outbound integration into whatever system they're using, they would use alarm management systems or video management system. So you have to bring the verified data into their system again. And so you had like 2 integrations and not a top priority thing, because we always thought security operating centers, it's their main business to verify alarms, but they do so much more. You have to look at, their total revenue, and alarm verification is only a fraction of it.
What was like, so yeah, maybe walk me through, like, again, back to my example, like what I realize is these gym operators, they care about 2 things. They care about opening up new locations. They care about getting new members. To a smaller extent, maybe they care about retaining existing members. Everything else is just not going to get, all that prioritized. And, I'll give you actually a different example. I was speaking with this founder of a company called Flash Food, really interesting product. What it does is it's this app that lets grocery stores kind of, how grocery stores, they obviously when their food is about to go bad, like they tend to discount it, but it's not as simple as it might seem. So this app is this kind of mechanism by which they can put out, these grocery stores can actually surface up anything that's about to go bad, and then people that are on the app go and they actually drive to the store to buy that stuff that's like 50% off. And they started off by obviously selling into like the smaller grocery chains, like 4 locations, 10 locations. And it was pretty crazy because he told me obviously he fought tooth and nail as we all do to like get those first few pilots. He finally got 2 different pilots, 2 different sets of grocery chains, and both of them churned. Both of them were like, you know what, like this is just not important enough. And then he got another one, which was like 100 times the size. Like instead of having 4 or 5, they had like 400 or 1,000, like 500 to 1,000 locations. And that one not only worked, they rolled it out across the entire division, like and turned all the stores. And so I asked the founder, I said, like, Josh, like, why would you be a fit for the massive enterprise and not for the little ones? And he said, I think a really great point. He's like, the little ones could grow by expansion. So the focus was, how do I go from 4 locations to 8 locations, 8 locations to 16? And in that context, what we're doing, what they were doing, which was like effectively on the margin, kind of adding a new revenue stream, was never going to be top of mind for the executives. Now, on the bigger one, 500, 1,000 locations in their geographies, they really had nowhere else to go. So everything was about optimization. And so play like this could be top of mind, could solve a top priority. I guess I'm curious, like in your case, as you think about that, what do you think was top of mind really for your buyers?
There were different customer profiles, which we realized also a bit too late. There are, for example, operating centers that have a different business model than other operating centers. They would, for example, make money with false alarms as well. So if the end customer, you have a business, car dealership, or even if you're a private customer, you have cameras installed, and if their business model is that they also make you pay for false alarms, then they don't care to optimize that. That's how they make their money, basically, right?
So they were charging per alarm.
Yeah, exactly.
Like per alarm resolved sort of thing, right?
Exactly. Or they would have like a flat rate with that many is included in the monthly pay, and if it exceeds, then they make them pay for anything, even if it's a false alarm.
Well, it's kind of like, a lot of legal tech, like lawyer technology is like about, efficiency, and it's like, well, it's billable hours model. So like the more hours they can bill, the more they can charge, and it's not, so it seems like kind of the incentives are not like fully aligned.
Yeah, exactly. And then but there are other types of security companies that are bigger and that build their own, that install those cameras, for example. Those ones, they had their interest was actually to optimize and to sell a holistic solution to their customers that is really streamlined. So that was a good customer profile. But again, still looking back, we focused on small and middle-sized companies. So we were putting a lot of effort and putting a lot of time for not a lot of customer lifetime value or average. What
was because you're talking about integrations, custom software, like all this big stuff. Like what was an ACV for you? Like what were these customers paying? What was the model?
Really different. We had one that was really big, and with them we made like 80 or 90% of our revenue, which in hindsight was bad because when they churned, it was basically the beginning of our end. And then all the other ones, we had a bunch of small ones. Their contract value was just between a few hundred euros and €1,000.
Like a year or a month?
A month.
And then so you mentioned the big one churned, which I guess they were paying probably like what, 50,000, 80,000
yeah,
or so
they
a year.
were like 80 roundabout.
Why did they churn?
They churned because we did several things wrong there. First of all, we didn't know our product costs that well. So our cloud-based false alarm filtering system, we didn't know exactly how much we're paying for one alarm. And they bought like per month, I think half a million of alarms that were processed. And we had a deal with them from the beginning. They were one of our first customers. And I knew back then already, okay, we're losing money with them, but it's a good pilot customer. It's a good reference customer. They have a few thousand cameras out there, all in our platform. But then, we wanted to adjust, right? We didn't want to lose money. We wanted to either bring the cost down or increase the price. So we went there, tried to negotiate a higher price, and that made them look at the competition and then eventually change. And I was really convinced that they're not gonna go to the competition, because we had put again a lot of time for customization for them. And I thought, the competition is big, and they're not going to invest that much time to do the same customization. But in the end, they used the APIs, and they were able enough to build their own workaround. And unfortunately.
What was the competition like? Did you enter a market where there are other people solving the same problem, or was there any big differences between you and the competition?
It was in the very beginning, 3 years ago, 2021, when we started. It was only this one competitor. They had done a pivot into this space. They were already big. They did an exit 2 years ago as well. There were not that many, and there are still not that many. I think it's getting more and more crowded. But this cloud-based false alarm filtering, that's there is competition, and the price sensitivity of the market is very, very high. That's why they changed. That's why we lost that client, which was very unfortunate. Yeah, and then we did realize all of that beginning of this year. That's why we did a pivot as well. So moving from cloud-based video analytics solutions to an edge-based solution. Because we thought, to work around all of these integration issues and shorten the sales cycle, we need to be on the edge. We need to be right at the source of the video camera, video source, basically. And we built. NVIDIA had just announced their new Jetson series, and we are super big fans of that. Real-time AI. And we said we will use a Jetson board, bring it to the cameras, automatically have a plug and play solution that connects to the cameras and has sophisticated AI functions running, and where we create the alarms ourselves. So we are not dependent on, whatever the camera system does, and we don't have to standardize. We don't have to do the integration. We just create the alarms ourselves on the NVIDIA Jetson board, and then connect it to our cloud other system. And that was the idea. And the vision was amazing. With this NVIDIA Jetson stuff, you can do really crazy things. You can really combine different AI models, not only computer vision, but you can have an input-output control where you control an actor. You can use speech models, LLMs, and really have a virtual security officer, basically, that can automate a bunch of processes that is currently done by either guards that are on the field or the operating center. And that was our goal or product vision, new product vision. And I was out on the field pitching that. I had a really great team. We did a funding round end of last year. So I had money, I had a really great team, and we had this new product idea or this pivoting strategy that was extremely promising. And then we went out there. We had a bunch of new big pilot clients that started actually testing. We sent them the hardware, and ultimately what happened, they tested for a few months, and what I and my team, basically what we promised them, just did not, we didn't deliver it in time. So they
just harder, it was just harder to do it on the edge than you'd foreseen.
Exactly. And it just took way longer than I had hoped. So traction and the revenue did not come as expected. Then that other client from the other previous business model dropped out. And that was basically our downfall. And then we had taken a public grant from the government here in Berlin, in Germany, which is basically for a research project. You have to hire 12 people. They want to create jobs here. You get a million euros, 600 in loan and 400 in equity free grant. Sounds amazing. That's, was a super good addition to the VC money that we got. But but then when the problem started, I did have an investor at the end that said, I still believe in you guys. I want to finance it until end of 2025. This is going to be a good thing, but you need to downsize.
How much money would that have been? Another like million, half a million?
I think another 500,000.
So material, good amount of money.
Yeah. And with a minimal team, super lean, downsized really efficiently, which did make sense. But the people, the bank from the government grant, they were like, no, either you continue with the original project with 12 people with this super high burn rate, or you discontinue the project and you have to pay back what you got. And then we were like, okay, we're screwed. Yeah. And then that made it also impossible to sell the company. I did have also a few potential buyers lined up, but when they heard, okay, there is 300,000 euros of debt, they were like, no, we're not gonna go in there. And then,
so maybe just now, like reflecting, looking back, I mean, I'm curious. Obviously, like you can look at it as, you ran out of money, and technically that's true. There's the issue with the grant, and that's not the first time that I hear that. Those things can come back and bite you, though. You often do them because you have to, so it's not like there's that much choice into it. But what do you think were either some of the big mistakes or reasons why the startup didn't work, fundamental reasons?
Mm-hmm. I think there are several things. We had to be, I think this customer profile, we did change it in the end, but the ideal customer profile, it has to be scalable. And if as a founder you are, you don't want to see it, or you want to, really push hard for that specific customer group, then it's not going to work. And then this is, I think, what we did for too long, until we realized, okay, it's not going to scale with this, with that customer group. We have to rethink the thing. We did that in the end, but we did it too late. And this whole integration stuff, I think we should have done the pivot way earlier. Then we would have had more time to actually deliver.
Let me ask this, like, let's say this edge, like in your best guess, if you had started off with AI on the edge, and let's just say that the tech was there from day one, do you think things would be different? Like, do you think there was enough market pull and demand for that value prop, for that idea?
Mm-hmm. It's very hard to say. I would say yes, but it is a very new field. It's a new market that you're kind of creating. So the physical security industry is very conservative and very fragmented, in Germany, at least, in the EU as well. So you need to the timing needs to be right, and you might need to educate the market and the customers a little bit. But as I said, once we had that new pivot, the new idea and the new product vision, they were extremely keen to test it. And we had, I think, 5 or 6 really big ones that were testing it, but where we didn't deliver the new promised features in time, and then they obviously didn't convert.
Makes sense. Well, Tolga, we'll stop it there. But thanks so much for sharing your story. I think like there's so much to be learned in stories like this one, where everything didn't pan out, everything didn't go according to plan. And I mean, that's most startup stories. That's the 99%. So thank you for openly sharing yours with us.
Thank you, Pablo. I hope it helps.
You remember like the first person who told you about Bitcoin, the first person who told you about Uber? You want to be that person because being first is cool. So be a cool person and tell your founder friends. Send it to them on WhatsApp, put it in a WhatsApp group, put it on a Slack channel, let people know about the show, let people know about this episode. Don't let somebody else beat you to the punch and share it with your founder friends first. Remember what Ricky Bobby said. If you ain't first, you're last.